All right. 5, 4, 3, 2,
Yeah, I've got
1.
chat.
Dale. Okay. Welcome everybody. Bienvenidos a Zoomlandia otra vez. Happy to have everybody here at the HIP conference, whether you're in person over there having a good time. I've been hearing some good report backs of good sessions and good networking, or you're joining us virtually. Welcome to our session, Latinx Leading Philanthropy in Chicago. I want to do a quick poll to see who's joining us today. So if we can have the first question come up, I'm hoping folks will be able to access it. Let's see if this is going to work. Do I have the poll going up? All right, we're going to move on ahead. I had wanted to know who was joining us today, both from like the job position that you have, whether it's at the C-suite level or program level or admin level. I also wanted to know who was identifying as Latinx or not, but apparently the poll isn't working. And I asked that question because when this title came up and this opportunity for us in Chicago, and I'm joined by my wonderful colleagues, Tony Martinez at the Oak Park River Forest Community Foundation, Maria Socorro de Pesquera at the Healthy Communities Foundation, and Michelle Morales at Woods Fund Chicago. It came up that there's all this new Latinx leadership happening. And, you know, like, why is that happening in Chicago? Why is it being said that Chicago's like got a lot of BIPOC leadership happening? So I was just curious to see who was at what level, but let's move on. So again, welcome to my colleagues. And I want to start, you know, this question that we have. Well, so Chicago Latinos in Philanthropy, let me just say that, right? This is a professional network, kind of loose network that's been going on since 1986 in the Chicago area. When I joined the Polk Brothers Foundation in 1998, one of the first things I saw in our donors forum, the Regional Association of Grant Makers, which is now Forefront, in their newsletter was this thing called CLIP, Chicago Latinos in Philanthropy. And I was like, what? This can't be real. And I quickly got in touch with David Pesquera and Carmen Prieto, who were sort of the chairs at the time, and was able to tap into this wonderful network of what has continued to be 70, 80, 90 known Latinos in philanthropy in the Chicago area. And I say known Latinos because there's probably a lot more of us that just haven't sort of stepped forward. So CLIP's been around since 1986. We are funders, trustees in the Chicago area. We provide professional development, grant making knowledge workshops. We foster sort of fellowship in the field. And so today, you know, we want to talk about what does Latino philanthropy in Chicago mean? And so to my three panelists, when you think about, right, this title, Latinx Leading Philanthropy in Chicago, what did that mean to you? Let's start with Maria, let's start with you.
Great. Well, thanks, Yvette. Yvette is someone who is greatly respected in the Chicago area as we think of philanthropy. And while certainly we have the co-founders of CLIP, thank you for this. I'll do shout out to my viejo, David Pesquera, over at McCormick Foundation. Yvette has been a key leader in keeping and moving philanthropy and lifting the voice of Latinos in philanthropy. So thank you, Yvette. So going back to your question about why Chicago and why this leadership in Chicago, you know, I have to say it is because as we think of Chicago has a history of organizing and organizers, right? And as we think of folks in philanthropy who have been there and been placed in the positions that they are and the work that they're doing, it is certainly we stand on the shoulders of the great organizing that has happened in Chicago in lifting the voices of community. And with that, I think that there have through the ranks, many of us have come to these roles knowing that we do stand on the shoulders of community, and that this is why we're here. And I again merit it all to the fact that Chicago is a city of great, good community organizing.
Awesome. Awesome. Tony, how about you?
Yeah, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you may be. You know, that question, I've been thinking a lot about it since, you know, we were prepping for this. And I think now more than ever, the Latinx community and philanthropy, there's so much more opportunity for us to really bring in different voices, different viewpoints than ever before. And again, building on what CLIP has done here in Chicago, and as Maria, you mentioned, thank you for mentioning organizing and that drive and that passion of getting involved in this. But I see nothing but tremendous opportunity for our community to have a much more integral role of how philanthropy overall can be changed to actually address a lot of the systemic issues that have put groups like ours on a marginalized places. So for me, that is what inspires me every day, and being part of this and leading an organization that is, quite frankly, you know, still very white centric, but with the voice and the authenticity that we bring to the table, now we are creating opportunities that, quite frankly, have, you know, not existed in a very long time. So it's all positive.
Cool. And Michelle, if I had asked you this question, well, I was going to say last year, but maybe a couple years ago now at this point, right? Because you're the newest one to Latinx philanthropy, or to just philanthropy in Chicago, having joined the Woods Fund in, I believe you started November 2019, right?
Yes.
So I'm just curious,
Great
like,
memory.
right? Yeah, what does we were very excited when you were, you know, chosen. When is she starting? Come on, hurry up. So to you, you know, what does this mean, Latinx leadership sort of in philanthropy? And boy, you had to make a pivot quickly, right, when the pandemic hit. So talk about that. What does it mean to you?
Yeah, you know, sort of riffing off of what Maria and Tony said, absolutely building upon, you know, the hopes and drives and vision of community organizers, working in partnership with them. I think often, right, as Latinos, Latinas, Latinx in philanthropy, we also bring a framework of colonialism to the work, because we have all experienced colonialism in one effect or another. I'm, you know, like a vet, I'm of Puerto Rican descent, so that's something that's very close to the surface for me. And I think it brings a different layer and a different lens to the work when you come from places that have been colonized, when you come from parents who have either immigrated or, like Puerto Ricans, migrated to this country. When you watch sort of those journeys, that very much sort of informs my leadership and how we partner as a foundation with all the community members that are fighting against structural and institutional racism and even colonialism within the US.
Great. And so, Michelle, so given, you know, your background then, right, both with organizing Puerto Rican, talking about colonialism as a Puerto Rican, why were you chosen for the job?
So
given that philanthropy has been, right, predominantly sort of white centric, male centric, straight centric, able centric.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm very fortunate that I'm working at a foundation that's had a history of women of color in leadership.
Sure.
So I am the third woman of color to, well, actually, if you take Laura Washington into the count, the fourth woman of color to lead the foundation. And so fifth woman, first president was a white woman, and fourth woman of color. So that in and of itself,
Latina.
And first Latina. So for the Woods Fund, that speaks volumes in terms of the Woods Fund's commitment to diversity, particularly at the leadership level. And so one, that was a mandate that the board had placed upon the search firm, that it had to be a person of color to be leading the foundation. But secondly, what I heard from the board, because I think Maria knows this, Tony doesn't know, I was shocked when I was chosen. When I applied for this job, I applied like I had, I was just like, yeah, I'm not gonna get it. So I went in the room like really confident and really like, because I was like, there's no way in hell I'm getting this job. And what I found out is that they really wanted someone that came from community organizing and that understood community organizing, that understood the nonprofit sector. And they thought that having that sort of a lens, which by the way, my predecessor also was not in philanthropy when she started as president of Woods Fund. So we have a little bit of a tradition at Woods Fund of hiring leaders that have not traditionally come from philanthropy, because I think we believe that it will, strengthen the work to come in with a different type of mindset.
Absolutely. Well, and Tony, why were you chosen?
Yeah. So quite frankly, it was my professional experience, being a community foundation. Prior to this job, I was at the Chicago Community Trust, and my fundraising background was a key thing for this organization. They wanted to increase their financial assets. And the experience that I have with working with donors, the programmatic experience and so on. So when the board were looking for somebody, that was the first and foremost. That's how I got in. Now that I'm in, I'm actually trying to change the whole mindset of, that we're beyond just a philanthropic asset management organization, and actually thinking about assets as being as community network people and so on. So it's a little bit of a shift, but it was my experience and where I came from, the Chicago Community Trust, that really helped me get this position and why they reached out to me. I think being Latino was, probably icing on the cake, they thought, but
Snap on that. Oh, so they fought you?
We'll
get back to that.
We'll get back to that. Yeah. We'll get back to that.
Yeah. Hey, Maria. So for you, why were you chosen to lead Healthy Communities Foundation?
Okay. Well, I think to answer that, let me mention a little bit about the Healthy Communities Foundation. The Healthy Communities Foundation, we're a health conversion foundation. What that means is we were created from the sale of a hospital that was nonprofit to a for-profit. Therefore, those assets become community assets, and they are assets to help and support the health and well-being of the community that was a part of that service of that hospital, the service section of the region, if you will. I grew up in that region. It was McNeil Hospital. I have a lot of history within McNeil Hospital, and so I grew up there. I still live 5 blocks away from the home that I grew up in. At one point, we lived one house over from my parents. That's a whole other story. But I am homegrown. I'm from the community, and our foundation had a reboot, a restart. Our board was reconstituted, and there was a drive to get back to community and to be rooted in how to strengthen the health and well-being of that particular community and region. Worked in that region. Not only did I live and grow up in the region, I've worked in that region for over 20 years. And so I feel as if I've come home. And it is such an honor and privilege to work at a foundation that is rooted in the voice of and to work alongside the community where I have lived, grew up in. My family's there, my son grew up in, and it's an honor and privilege. So I think it's because I came with the experience of nonprofit management, working in advocacy, working with community, but also homegrown.
So you all talk about that being Latinx seemed to be sort of a real asset or sort of a +1 when they were looking for candidates. Talk to me about now the realities of, but is there a challenge to that also, right? Is there some obligation that you have now? We've talked about this a lot in CLIP, right? And I've met several, I'll be honest, I've met several in my 22 years, 23 years, met several Latinx folks. Just because they're Latinx and working in philanthropy doesn't mean they want to champion the flag, right? Doesn't mean they want to talk about the issues. Doesn't mean they want to advocate for more resources to our communities. So now that you got in and you were chosen for those, right, sort of real value of your identity and your experience. Is there something challenging with being sort of Latinx in philanthropy at your shop, especially being the head, right? The buck sort of stops with you. Anybody?
I'm going to go ahead and start with this because I have to. Our board is 50% BIPOC. Our board chair is Latina. I am, obviously Latina, Mexicana de origen, and our team is made up of majority BIPOC. Our grantee partners are, well, we just took a look at, a good majority of our grantee partners are BIPOC led. Mm-hmm. And so we're rooted, if we are a community foundation that, or a foundation that is rooted in community, we must reflect that community. Our region is close to 70% Latinx. So over half of our region is Latinx. We have one of the largest Latinx communities in the country. And so we must own it. And so I think for us early on, I recall hiring one of our first team members, the woman who leads our program strategies, Latina, and my board chair at the time, BIPOC, the Asian woman who used to be at Woods, and I recall saying to her, "I'm about to make this offer, just FYI," and she said, "Yay, that's great! Let's celebrate this." So I am so privileged to be in this role, in this moment of support, but also the fact that if we want to go back to the work that we do in addressing our mission, the demographics are present, and we must lead at this moment in time, con honor, in lifting up our communities in that way.
Awesome. Tony, how about you? How's that reality been playing out over the last 4 years, 4+ years?
Yeah, it was interesting at the beginning in the conversations that I would have with the board, and to be quite frank and honest, I wanted, whenever I talked about Latinx, Black communities, and so on, I had to be very careful and sensitive that, because of the audience and the folks that I was reporting to, which was primarily white, that it didn't seem like an agenda-driven type of thing. So I had to kind of massage and nurture and explain the differences, brought my experiences, listened to them and their experiences, found some commonalities in that, so that way I can build a more common understanding of what all of this means, from the systemic issues that we have, the racist issues that exist, and so on. So it's interesting because as a leader, I have tremendous pride in being Mexican American. My dad's from Laredo, my mom's from Nuevo Laredo, and all that. But I was very conscious of the audience that I was speaking to, and I was very conscious of that at times I had to meet folks where they're at and bring them along on this journey. And it could be it could be painfully slow. So it's now, with everything that's happened in terms of Black Lives Matters and everything that we've seen in our community, I think over the course of the past year and a half, I have been able to pivot and show that we can no longer ignore any of this. And as a community foundation, as Maria alluded to, like, if we're going to have the word community in our name, then we have to back it up. And that means
a binding contract.
That's a binding contract. And that means we have to involve the community. So it's being president and CEO, 3 years, first time I'm in this type of leadership role, being on the other side of the table, it's something that I had to learn even more so. And to be able to deepen those relationships, so that way I can bring people along.
And for 9.5 years, right? 10 or 11 years, you were at Chicago Community Trust raising money.
10, yeah.
So unlike Michelle and Maria, you still have to raise money, but
Yes.
what's different about being on this side of the table as the CEO raising that money and as, again, Latinx
Yeah.
leader?
Now it's selling a vision. Before it was selling, a service, don't advise funds and all this boring stuff, right? Now it's the vision. Now I am telling people of what I and the organization envisions for our community and the aspirations that we have and the hard work that we're going to go through in order to make change, right? And I do this because change is small, is gradual, and so on.
But it's mighty.
It's and that is the difference. And that's a different skill set,
Right, right.
to sell that vision. I wasn't the head of a nonprofit organization, so I didn't have to sell the vision at that time. It's complete. Being on this side, it was something that I had to understand and appreciate and move forward with.
Yeah, I love that idea of selling the vision. That's really awesome. So Michelle, at Woods, right? I mean, in Chicago, when we talk about a foundation, right, that sort of gets it at the social justice end of the spectrum versus, say, the social service end of the spectrum, Woods comes up, right? So, so what does equity look like sort of at Woods? Because I know just because, you have all the food groups on the board and you do all the organizing funding and all that, that there's got to still be some hard conversations. And I guess for you, right, coming from organizing in that, and now you're coming up on your second year anniversary, right?
In November.
Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
Man,
Mhm.
that's amazing. I was going to say 1 year. God, that was fast. Like, so
It was
what
very
did-
fast, yeah.
Yeah. So what was different from what you thought the job was going to be? Maybe that's a good question.
Yeah. So so just so people are aware, before I came over to Woods Fund, I was the head of a nonprofit, so did fundraising like Maria and did in her previous life, and like Tony did in his, well, still does in his previous and current life. So I didn't realize you would still kind of do fundraising even in a private foundation, right? So most people, hopefully in the audience, the pooled funds, or like, talking to your philanthropic colleagues about
Right.
funding money, pooling money together for different things. I was like, oh, this is a thing. Like I still have to go ask someone now. It's different, right? Because I'm not in some ways
Right.
talking to really wealthy people and trying to get money for the nonprofit, work. This is for going to
That's
peers
funny.
often.
Right.
But it was sort of shocking to me that there was still this level of fundraising, which is
I
very
always
different.
say, if you see three like funders talking together, they're hustling each other.
Yeah.
Trying to
Yeah,
get,
yeah.
Maria, I need money
Absolutely.
for this funder collaborative. And Michelle,
Yes.
oh, Michelle, did you hear about this collaborative?
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right.
Absolutely.
So we're all still fundraisers.
Yeah.
That's a reality. Some
And
folks
I
don't
think the
know.
amount of committee work, I was talking to a friend of mine who's in academia, and when I was explaining to her the amount of like different committees and pool funds and things, she was like, "Oh, that sounds a lot like academia, where you sit on all these different committees." So in the way that the sector works, how it works collaboratively through, these various committees that are addressing kind of like broader issues, or trying to pull the resources together to tackle, certain issues that we know in Chicago. There was a lot of energy that came out of the pandemic, and a lot more, even more collaborations that emerged after during and currently through the pandemic. Those were like new for me. So it was just like, oh, this is what it is to work in philanthropy. Now I'm kind of used to it, but I would say the first 6 months were like kind of jarring, like kind of like, this is what it's like, huh?
Absolutely. Right.
So yeah.
Okay. And Maria, I saw you nodding a little bit at some of those realities. So for you, you've been there now. You've been there 4+ years, right? Tony, you've been at OPRF about 3 years. So
We're still raising
what's
money.
Yeah, you still.
As a former fundraiser, I call it relationship building. I don't even call it money anymore. It's about relationships, really. And I think all of us will continue doing that. And yeah, I mean, you figure out what's needed and how you can work together and collaborate, and resources, whether it's money, people, time, whatever that is. But yeah, it's a softer sell than fundraising.
Yeah, and Eva, just going back to your question about what's different, and
Yeah. What do you know
and
now that you didn't know back then?
I think it really goes back to understanding our power, and
Mm,
to Tony's point of relationship building, and continuing to raise money as uh, Michelle is raising. And I find myself, whether it's a fund collaborative, pooled funds, or there's a really great project going on
yeah,
that some of our peers should know about. And
right.
because we are in a position where organizations from our communities will come to, whether or not they think we could find resources. And so, I have found how important it is to claim our use our power and influence to continue to lift community. So it's not just about, here, you give a grant to this nonprofit or this grantee partner of yours and it's done. It's, we give this grant and we need to make sure that our peers know about this great work that's happening. So I think that's what the revelation that has come, that it is, yes, we're pooling funds. Yes, we're doing our due diligence and working with community, but we are also a link to
Yeah.
community with our peers.
Yeah. And I think that link and lived experience gives us all, honestly, an upper hand, because oftentimes in sitting in philanthropic discussions with colleagues and peers that maybe are disconnected from an issue because they either are very privileged, have been very privileged, and don't really, I think we bring also a completely different, discourse often to the table, because I'm speaking for the three of us, but we're sometimes still living through many of the issues that philanthropy is tackling. Our families are living through issues that philanthropy is trying to help to solve by, support and resources. And so I think we bring a different discourse and narrative to the tables because of our lived experience, but also because of our link to community, because we remain close to community, and because, as I mentioned, the issue, we're often living the issues. I have to, often sometimes help my dad advocate at health, and to help, practitioners and translate for him sometimes, or, dealing with my sister who does not have a college degree and struggles with her learning disability, and advocating for her. So there's a lot, I think, that we do and that we live with, that we bring to the table and to our leadership in philanthropy as well.
Okay. And Tony, bring us to something.
Yeah, I on the what everybody has said, and also as funders, we are those experiences. I can tell you from our foundation itself, there were probably 10 organizations, 11 organizations during the pandemic that we supported just because I can relate to that experience and I can share that with my committees. And that was, when you talk about power, that's the power. That's the power of having people like us in these positions that understand. So again, to curtail with what Michelle and Maria said, and that's real dollars. That's dollars going out. That's positive influence to people, who are struggling or who need that extra, opportunity or advantage. So absolutely. And again, bringing our authentic selves to the table and those experiences, and knowing our capacity and our leadership capacity of what we have, and go beyond that, it's a really big change maker for our community.
Absolutely. And so I think I would be remiss if we didn't talk about sort of the Black-Brown tension that either comes up, is brought to our attention, is talked about. Don't know if it's a way to just divide us more or to just really bring a spotlight. But do you find, in terms of either fundraising for issues, right, be it at the community foundation or pooled fund, do you find in the groups that you're supporting, is the tension real? Is this Black-Brown tension real? And if so, how does it manifest?
Yeah, it's real. It's absolutely real. And it's real within our families, it's real within our communities, it's real within our work. The role that we're in, going back to bridge builders, and connectors, opening tables, bringing folks together, I think is really important. Some of the work that we're doing at the Healthy Communities Foundation is really building up, moving towards understanding that if we say that racial and ethnic equity is a social determinant of health and well-being, then we must be clear that it is present and we must address it. And our grantee partners all must be a part of this movement with us, which means that we have a responsibility at the Healthy Communities Foundation to create the tables and opportunities for capacity building, if you will, on having that shared language, beginning with shared language on what we mean by moving towards racial justice. So it is present. If we look in our region, we've got places like Maywood, that was a predominantly Black suburb of the city of Chicago, that is now mostly Latinx. You go to the city of Chicago and you go to Englewood, and you go to West Englewood, it's, taquerias and birrerias all over, right? It is, but that should not be a fear for the Black community to say they're taking it. It is more of how do we build relationships, because we have so much in common. We have more in common than we have in different. And so I think that the role of philanthropy is very, I think the role of us, especially BIPOC leaders in philanthropy, is to be conveners and build capacity and hold communities accountable.
Yeah, we everything that Maria said. I mean, we have such a privilege and such a position of power to also sort of push narratives forward, and so one of the things that we do at Woods Fund is we really encourage solidarity work between grantee partners, particularly across race, across ethnicity, across communities, and we fund that type of work, right? So we not only encourage it, but we try to apply resources to really get groups from differing races and differing communities to start working together towards movement building. And I think also as Latinos and Latinas in philanthropy, there's a reason why I brought up colonialism, in the beginning of our panel, but it's also like, how can we lead discussions around anti-Blackness, right? And how it shows up in the Latinx community, and how it shows up within our own families, within our own upbringing. And that's very much rooted in colonialism, right? We were trained, beaten to death often, right, to align with whiteness, right? And that's ingrained in all of Latin America and the Caribbean. So then how do we begin to undo that? And how can we as philanthropic leaders begin to push a discourse around not only anti-Blackness, but what does it mean to grapple with that as a Latinx community and as Latinx leaders?
Absolutely. Yeah, Tony, you've talked about having these discussions with your board, and I know they've got to be different from 2018 to 2021. So
yeah. It's again, I want to piggyback on what Michelle said. Philanthropy, the way we use it as a tool, I mean, we make competition for these groups, and it shouldn't be that way. And what we're trying to do here at the Oak Park River Forest Community Foundation is do exactly, I mean, Woods Fund and Healthy Community, like you guys are my examples, right? And every time I need some kind of firepower, like, look, these guys are doing it, they're doing it right, and so on, and poke. But again, when I talk about systemic issues and philanthropy being a tool to marginalize people, we have to come to the realization of how we utilize and how we use philanthropy intentionally to make a divide. So what we're trying to do is change that narrative and show, first of all, right now we're still in a period of self-reflection. Like we have to realize that this is happening, and that's a hard pill to swallow. because there's a lot of folks who've been here a very long time, and they're having this syndrome, right? This guiltiness about it, and kind of to help diffuse that, but to change how they perceive and how they look and how they review these things, is where we're at this time. So we're kind of like in the beginning stages of a lot of the work that all of you have done. Not that we're not, not that we're, far behind, but there's some work that still needs to be done. And that competition is, we create that. So if we created it, we can diffuse that.
Absolutely. And I always say the chase of equity, right, is like the horizon. You can see it, you just sort of never reach it. So I've often said, where's the end game for having an equitable society? Just tell me and how much it costs and we'll raise it, right? And then we'll solve it. And it's just not that easy. So I want to make sure that if there's any folks in Zoomlandia that has any questions for our panelists, please be sure to drop them in the chat so that we can get it. We've got about 12 minutes left. So you mentioned syndrome, Tony, and I wanted to ask, I have to ask, right? And so imposter syndrome, has that little goblin tapped you on the shoulder, often, ever? And if so, what do you do to counter those feelings?
All the time. I will say this last night. So last night I was invited to a dinner. We have a new Dominican University, which is headquartered here in River Forest, has a new president. And the previous president had a reception at the house. And, it's in a fancy house in Oak Park, and walking out before even getting out of the car, I'm like pumping myself up. There's this incredible thing about sense of belonging, and that comes across that either sometimes you do or sometimes you don't. Go to the event. It was a wonderful night. I was probably one out of 3 people of color in a group of 40 folks, but I know my stuff, and it's really the first time in 3 years that I was around a table and I felt as part of the group. And I think that was more in my head than in their head, because they were very welcoming at the beginning. The host, the former president, like gave me a hug, and I'm like, are you vaccinated? Okay, all right, give each other a hug. But it was a welcoming thing. And I think previously I would have been so caught in my head into, I don't belong. What am I doing here? How can someone like me be in this position? Now it's no, the confidence that one builds along the way. And that helped me out.
Cool.
So yeah, still beat it up, every once in a while, knock it out.
Maria?
Yeah, is a Mexicana, daughter of immigrants, brought to this country, a 0.5 brought to this country. I was 6. There is a value in saying humilde. Ay, que humilde. And it is celebrated when you say que humilde, how humble. And so we are, at least I was raised to be humble, and that to be ambitious is a negative, right? And so if my cultural upbringing was to be humilde, talk about that, I was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to be humilde in front of people. It is the other people, in our biculturalism, the other side requires us to take that humilde cape off, and but constantly reminded of imposter syndrome, and on a daily basis, because when there aren't many others who look like us in these positions.
And what do you do about it to combat it? You like to kick it out of the, get out of the casa. What do you do?
I think I get it from my team. I have this amazing team. I get it from my viejo, who just yesterday when we had the social determinants of health plenary yesterday, right before going on and feeling this again, imposter syndrome going on, he reminded me, you do this every day. You got this without me asking. So, oh, thank you. That's right. We do. We work this on this every
Awesome.
day. So yes,
Cool.
it's present.
Yes. Michelle, you wanna any experience with imposter syndrome?
Oh, all the time. All the
Okay.
time. I mean, even, when Maria talked about power, I still struggle to understand my own power in this space. Like there are philanthropic leaders who are my peers, who I still see in my mind's eye, like, oh no, they're like above me, even though we're presidents of a foundation. So I still struggle with it all the time. My team knows it. I'm very open about it. And I'm actually like getting executive coaching to try to like solve it and deal with it, because
Awesome.
it does rear its head. It does, to Tony's point, get in the way sometimes, and you can really talk yourself out of opportunities and situations. And it's something ever since I've started my leadership journey, I've struggled with imposter syndrome. So, oh yeah, all the time.
Okay.
Pops up.
Okay. So then, we've got about 7 minutes. So for new people coming up in philanthropy, we have, if you looked at the CLIP sort of directory that we had, 20 years ago, and you looked at the directory now, there's so many younger folk coming up, Latinx folks coming into philanthropy, and a lot of activists, a lot of organizers, and sometimes philanthropy is not an activist field. So what what do you recommend to folks coming into the field in terms of what to do? Are they a Latinx program officer, a Latinx CEO, or are they just program officer who happens to be Latinx? What advice would you give to them? Anyway.
I'll try to answer that. I think the big thing is understanding who you work for and the organization.
I thought you were
and
going to say
mission.
understanding who you are. Interesting. Understand who you
work for.
Okay.
And I'll bring to understanding who you are in the circle. Understanding what the mission is and believing in that mission, and then bringing your true self to the position. A friend of mine, when I came before I came to the foundation, gave me this just awesome advice. He's like, you got this position because of you. Don't forget that when you're there. And very simple, but it has stuck on my mind.
Cool.
It is the way I am, the way I approach, the way I speak, the way I work, and all this stuff. And I have to every once in a while remember that I got here because I know my work. I know how to do this. And people, people like that, right? So
Awesome.
I think that's my advice. Don't forget
Cool.
who you are, but understand the mission of the organization, and that's a
Absolutely.
You would never ask this question of a white president of a foundation. Are you white first, or are you president first, right? And I have to say, there is Jim Durkin, who was the president of the Community Memorial Foundation and the interim president of the Healthy Communities Foundation, of Irish immigrant himself. It was this white man who always pushed people of color because he understood the immigrant experience. But I think of him all of the time when I realized he was never asked, are you an Irish president, or are you a president of a foundation? He was just the president of that foundation and did it so well. Mm-hmm. We have to know who we serve, what's the mission of our foundation, and how will we accomplish it, and what do we bring in our lived experience as Latinx individuals strengthens our work in meeting our mission. That's what I have to say about that.
Cool. Michelle?
No, I feel like I'm just going to regurgitate what Tony and Maria said. Yeah, I think it's because there isn't a foundation, that is focused specifically on Latinx communities, particularly in Chicago, like Woods Fund, we fund all communities. It's really about understanding the issues that are at play and sort of what do you bring to the table. So I think, even, I'm a Puerto Rican president of a foundation that funds organizing and advocacy. And while we're not just going to only fund in the Puerto Rican community, I do, what do you bring to the table from to what Maria said, your lived experiences, your experience with issues? Because I think what can be seen as a detriment, we actually, in my hand, gives us the upper hand because we have lived the issues that, again, philanthropy is trying to solve. We have literally walked in those shoes. That is an enormous leg up on foundation presidents or program officers who never have had to deal with the issues because maybe they're white and white skin privilege, et cetera. So I think that lived experience is so needed in philanthropy, particularly at the leadership level, and is needed to start to shift, right, the narrative of philanthropy and how we partner with communities.
Awesome. Maybe a last question. So in your current role, right, and in philanthropy, what are you most proud of that you've been able to do? Sorry, I didn't pose that to you earlier.
No, so I have a brand new team.
Yeah, you do. Congratulations.
The majority of my team has been there for less than a year. I've been there for 2 years. So it's
Makes you the old timer, right?
I'm the old timer, right? So it's a brand new team. So I'm excited that what I'm most proud of is that, I think there have been, right, in the past foundations when they're going through a structural change or through new leadership that, sometimes they freeze funding or maybe they, don't fund as much because they're trying to reorder their house. And we've been able to maintain our grant making and actually increase our grant making through the pandemic and in 2021. So I'm really proud of the team and how they jumped in with 2 feet and are figuring it out as they go along and learning how to be funders as they go along. And so that's one of the things that I'm most proud of.
Awesome. Maria, Tony, what are you most proud of in your tenure?
Oh my goodness. I'm absolutely proud of my team. I have so much to be proud of. My team is amazing. It is every single day, every single one of them. And my board is amazing. The strategic plan that was put in place. But I have to say, there's this one individual on our board that I am in awe of because this individual was one of the most conservative individuals on our board. Pushed, make my knees shake in the beginning. And now he is who was the one who COVID hit and said, we've got to be bold. I think if we could have given the entire endowment out at one time, he probably would have. But he understands and he puts now a racial equity lens into this work. So I am proud of the work that my team has done in partnership with our board to help walk us in this journey towards achieving racial equity and racial equity and health equity and justice.
Awesome. Tony, got about a minute.
Yeah, same thing. Using words as racially just society and equity in our vision and mission. That would have never have happened if it wasn't for staff and I'm gonna toot my own horn, my leadership enforcing that issue. Right. I don't think we do that often. And yeah, I mean that's a positive change. Short story, my board member, my board chair, we are changing investment managers. The investment manager went to another position. He's a white male, works for a very wealthy bank, asked the question, do you have any people of color who can manage our account?
Nice.
That would not have been done if we didn't go through this tremendous exercise of trainings, sessions, arguments, figuring out who we're trying to be and why we're here. That would have never happened if it wasn't for all of that.
For the work you've all done.
So that to me is what counts.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us today. We are done. Hope you have enjoyed this. We've certainly enjoyed having dialogue with you. If you're ever in Chicago, look us up, or in Oak Park, look us up. And with that, I think we will be signing off. Thanks again, Michelle, Tony, Maria. Always a pleasure to be with you. See you back in Chicago. Okay.
Hasta pronto. Abrazos.
Okay. Adios.